Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Thank you for joining. This is a GMAT Club live profile video session. We have Alex, Krishna, and Harrison here today. We'll walk through the questions they have, some observations about their profile, while the dialogue that we have will, of course, be specific to them and their questions at their profiles. We do hope, as always, during these sessions that whoever's dialed in from around the world can extract value and relevance and applicability toward their own situations as we go through. So looking forward to it. My name is Greg Guglielmo. I'm the founder of Avanti Prep. It's an MBA admissions consulting firm. I did my own MBA at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. Prior to my MBA, I'd worked in asset management, financial services for about 7 years, did a stint in private equity post-MBA prior to founding Avanti Prep. Over the past few years, I've worked with literally hundreds of applicants from around the world. So hopefully we'll be able to add some insights to today for, again, Alex, Krishna, and Harrison, and for others who are dialed in. What we're going to do today is go around the horn. Alex, Krishna, Harrison will give a little bit of an introduction as to who they are, 1 or 2 minutes each. You will be able to see, I believe, their profiles up on the screen at a certain point as well, so people at home can follow along. So we'll go through those intros, and then we'll circle back and spend about 10 to 15 minutes going through each of their profiles more specifically and answering their questions. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Alex for a little bit of a brief introduction on his background, work experience, etc.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I live in Georgia. I went to Emory and then Georgia Tech to study. I ended up studying electrical engineering, but I also have an undergraduate degree in math and economics. I currently work on designing and building full motion satellite tracking antenna systems as an electrical engineer and hoping to get my MBA starting next fall.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Looking forward to it. Krishna, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Krishna. I'm currently in New York. I graduated from Cornell. I first started my career in consulting out in Boston and then transitioned to financial services, more on the buy side last year. I'm hoping to get my MBA starting next fall. So looking forward to just getting Greg's feedback.
All right. Looking forward to it as well. And Harrison?
Yep, I'm Harrison, coming to you out of Boston. I went to Tufts undergrad, studied economics and public health, and then spent a couple of years in life sciences consulting. And then after that, have worked for a couple different kind of big name healthcare providers / insurers. So I'll, like the rest of them, hoping to get my MBA in the fall and transition more into the startup healthcare space.
Great. Thank you, Harrison. So we'll go now kind of person by person, as mentioned. Appreciate, again, those introductions. I should say, too, by the way, for anyone at home who's looking to have a similar dialogue, I'll repeat this at the end as well, but for anyone at home who's looking to have a similar dialogue or Alex, Harrison, Krishna, for that matter, we're doing the short version now. Anyone, of course, is welcome to go to avantiprep.com. You could sign up for a free consultation there, and we could have a similar and actually really more in-depth and personalized conversation. But we'll transition over to Alex and then work our way through. Alex, we heard your introduction. We see your profile on the screen. I've had the opportunity to review everyone's profiles in advance. Do you have any specific questions, anything top of mind that you'd like to ask about? We could go through those questions. I'm happy to share thoughts on those as well as others along the way.
So, I have not a completely atypical application profile. It's more and more engineers are deciding to go get their MBA. One thing that's sort of hard to glean if you're looking at top schools is really what programs cater better to a technical-minded individual or to engineers in general. I'd be interested what your insight there is, particularly in respect to my target schools or other similarly appropriate schools.
Yep. Yeah, so I think you're definitely right that we do see a good chunk of engineers who go in that pursue their MBAs. It's a not uncommon at all kind of transition. One way to kind of scratch the surface on that is, look, first thing is you could almost sort of go by reputation. you have a little bit of an intuition like, oh, MIT Sloan, Carnegie Mellon type, if we're talking about in schools in the top 20. I know that's a little wider than you seem to be interested in looking, but even just kind of a little bit of anecdote, a little bit of reputation could kind of lead you there a little bit. If we lift up the hood, the data actually does support that a little bit. Different schools will play. If you go, and this is something everyone, of course, at home can do, and not just for in terms of previous experience or undergraduate field of study. But I would encourage anyone at home, as you're thinking about your own profile, where's my GMAT score? Where's my GPA? Where do I live? What industry am I coming from? Visit schools' class profile pages. A lot of that data will be there. We'll point to it a little more specifically in context of Alex's question in a moment. You'll be able to see GMAT ranges and GPA ranges, and again, industry and geography and all sorts of different information like that. Now, my big disclaimer on that, though, just because a certain school, it has a lower percentage of engineers or something than another one, these numbers are all relative. So if somebody sees, a lower percentage at one school, a higher percentage at another, it doesn't mean, of course, that engineers should only apply to the schools that have higher percentages of engineers and that they should stay away from the other ones. I mean, there could even be uniqueness and unique value add at certain of the others. But to answer Alex's question more specifically, I mean, again, I mentioned MIT Sloan, 31% or roughly a third of their class in a given year will come from an engineering background. You'll see lower numbers at other schools. I'm thinking of like Columbia, the print the year before last was, I believe, 17%. Chicago Booth was somewhere in between, around 24%. Berkeley Haas, my alma mater, 16%. Other schools kind of bucket things a little differently, so it's harder to follow. Like some schools will publish what percentage of our students come from engineering. Others will put a big bucket out there, a big number out there for STEM writ large. I wouldn't go, so you will, Alex, be able to see some of those numbers if you went school by school. I think you could scratch around that, but there are enough engineers applying to all top MBA programs that I really probably wouldn't let it drive my decision about school selection. I think a lot of other things can drive your decision around school selection, namely, to what degree does the school resonate with you? To what extent do you value brand, reputation, rankings, career placement, geography, location, class size, alumni network, all those kind of more conventional things. You might eyeball this statistic a little bit. You might talk to, when you do your school research and engagement, you might try to connect with people who maybe had more technical or engineering backgrounds who are there now, so you can get a feel for, well, what's it like? What hiccups, what obstacles did you face in the application process? But I don't know that you necessarily need to kind of let that totally dictate your school selection. So I'll pause there if you have any follow-up questions, or we could move on to a second question as well.
No, I'm good. We can move on.
All right. Anything else on your mind?
So I guess the main concern with my own profile is that by the time I apply, I'll be about under 3 years of work experience, or by the time I'm admitted, I'll have under 3 years of work experience, which is usually outside the middle 80%. Mm-hmm. What concerns do you have there? What sort of things you think I can do to mitigate the risk of that aspect of my profile?
Sure thing. I think great question. And again, kind of connects back to some of those class profile statistics I was just mentioning, and were related to your first question as well. As Alex was alluding to, and for folks at home, a lot of schools will publish not only an average work experience number. Usually for schools like this, you'll see that number around 5 years. A lot of schools, not all, but many / most, will publish a middle 80% range as well. And it's a middle 80% range, number of years of full-time post-college work experience that the students in the MBA program have when they arrive. They'll publish a new number every year. What you'll usually see for these programs, Alex alluded to it, is if the average is like 5 years of post-college full-time work experience, the middle 80% is often like, for Columbia, it's 3 to 7. For Kellogg, it's 3.5 to 7. Berkeley Haas is a little wider. It's like 3 to 8, but it's usually in that zip code. Alex, to his specific question, will have 2.5 years of experience at enrollment. So he actually will be short of the 10th percentile. He'll be on the very kind of low end of the work experience, or at least that main kind of bell curve of work experience. So a couple things on that, Alex, and to answer your question more directly. One thing to keep in mind is, unfortunately, I would say that if you applied this year and next year, you, all else equal, you probably would fare a little better next year because you are this year really on that front end of the curve. Doesn't mean you can't get in anywhere. Doesn't mean it can't happen. But I think on the margin, I do find people in that juncture where you're going to have less than 3 years of work experience at the point of enrollment, you could be leaving a little bit of school upside on the table. Just something to kind of have in your mind. Now, strategically, what are the implications of that? By the way, I should say too, Harvard, Stanford, people, parse through the data. Sometimes they trend a little younger than some of the other schools. You'll see averages in the 4 and 4.5 range, sometimes driven down by 2+2 programs and that sort of thing. But I think you're fine to apply this year. It's just, if that's what you want to do and where your heart is, you just want to have all this stuff, I think, in the back of your head. Strategically, implications. One, I think, as you think about school selection, you could say to yourself, hey, I know I might be just on the early side of things this year. Maybe I'm going to be open. Maybe because of that, I want to be more aggressive this year. And I'm okay with, if that didn't work out, reapplying next year, because maybe I'll have a little more substance and some enhancement and more leadership and more to share and that sort of thing. So it could play into your school strategy. Other people might say, well, I really want to get in somewhere, so I need to widen out my school range a little bit so that some of these tippy top tier schools don't get turned off about the lesser work experience. So there could be strategic implications as they relate to school selection, depending on whether and how open you are to potentially applying next year. As far as mitigating that, being proactive about it. Okay, everyone, we think about our own profiles, we think about our strengths and some of the softer spots in our applications. How can I preempt those softer spots? We all have them. I think in your case, it's a few things. It's thinking about in resumes, in essays, ultimately, hopefully in interviews, how do you really make sure your leadership and impact come across? You'll have 2.5 years of experience at enrollment, but your resume capture right now will only be 1.5 years. So how, if that's kind of a right out of college, typically more junior type work, how do I articulate my leadership and my impact? I know that there are going to be other engineers out there who have been promoted 2 or 3 times and have run projects. So I see in your profile, we can see up on the screen as well, you actually have had the opportunity to become the lead engineer on certain projects and really spearhead things. So I would encourage you to unpack that and make sure it's really tangible. It comes across in your resume and elsewhere. Another place that could occur is recommendations. Obviously, your recommenders are the ones ultimately writing those, but sitting down with one's recommenders, walking through, these are the schools I'm applying to, these are the timelines that are at play, these are the questions that you're going to be asked, and even putting together like a brainstorm sheet. These are some projects, these are some themes I reflected on and was for your review, if you think that any are appropriate to capture in your recommendation. A little bit of that strategization can be helpful for anybody. It's, recommender prep, imbuing upon them the thoughtfulness and specificity that needs to go into these recommendations. But in your case, Alex, specific to the question you asked, might there be an opportunity to encourage them to focus on leadership experiences that you've had, professional maturity, leading groups, all these things that an admissions committee might look at and say, if somebody only has 1.5 years of experience at the point of application, we could be worried about. Maybe they're not as seasoned, haven't had as much impact as, again, the person who's really more in the middle of the bell curve for work experience. That could be another place to do that. So you're looking for those opportunities. It's a little bit like, it's not a perfect science to it, but between resumes, essays, recommendations, interviews, you would maybe want to strategize, how do I make sure that all that stuff comes across?
Great, thank you.
Other thoughts or questions?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, and I'll just give you a few other comments as well, and observations. I think you're, a really unique dual degree program that you have there, really high GPAs. I think it's a long story short, I think you've got a very impressive undergraduate record. The majors that you had as well, both the actual and perceived by the admissions committee, difficulty of these majors is very high. The fact that you got a 3.8 in both/all of these, you completed them in shorter timeframes. I think that's going to be very impressive for you. That'll, for the most part, probably speak for itself. They're going to see your transcripts. They're going to see where you studied. They're going to see your GPAs. They're going to see math and econ and electrical engineering. But even on top of that, thinking about, now let me think about what my goals are here and how can I extract relevance from what I did in undergrad and professionally to project a platform toward my goals. And it's a narrative that we all it's a narrative construct that everyone on this call and all applicants and everybody dialed in will want to keep in mind. You want to kind of define very specifically what your goals are, short and long term, perhaps even short, medium, and long term. What's this forward-looking trajectory? Where do I want to go? And be very, very specific about that. We could talk more about the requisite level of specificity I think it'll come up over the course of this call. But once you define those goals, you can kind of think to yourself, well, what knowledge, skill, and experience do I already have that's relevant toward those goals? And what knowledge, skill, and experience am I missing and therefore need to acquire through each of these MBA programs? Given my goals, I already have A, B, C, D, very crystallized, very specific, unpack that. I already have certain knowledge, skills, and experience that are already relevant to these goals. They give me a foundation to achieve these goals. At the same time, if I have A, B, C, D, I'm missing E, F, G, H. What are E, F, G, H? How do you define them? How do you crystallize them? The E, the F, the G, the H, that is your YMBA. And you want to think about how each of these schools uniquely fills those buckets. So Alex, in your case, again, I think that given what your goals are, the industries in which they lie, there is going to be a high degree of relevance and preparation. A good bit of that A, B, C, D could come from not only your previous professional experience, but also some of what you did at undergraduate level. And you can even pick that apart more, I'm sure, than what we see on paper now. Not just the academics, but projects you did and hands-on things and things you learned through that, and maybe even extracurriculars as well. Two other quick comments, then we'll move along to Krishna, and we'll kind of repeat this process for everybody. Alex, I think many engineers encounter this, but make sure in your resumes, when any of us, really, engineers or otherwise, we work in a certain industry, we get used to speaking the language of that industry. Sometimes we can border on jargon and things in our resumes. How do you make sure that the bullet points on your resume are really clear, that a reader who's not in your industry, a reader on the admissions committee, a layperson even, would be able to very intuitively understand what you do? I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as you tackle your resume, even beyond the resume, but we'll say resume here. And how within that, on kind of a more advanced content level, not just clarity, but content, how do you make sure you are unpacking and articulating in a resume things that are kind of business relevant, or even if it's an engineering role, but skills that are business relevant. So we wouldn't want, and from the bullets you've shared here, I don't get the sense that you would do that. I think you're on the right track with some of these. You're talking about leadership. You're talking about leading teams, leading projects. So I think you're kind of going down the right road there. But I would encourage everyone to think about not just like what I did within the specific industry I'm in, but like, how did I do it? What was the impact? You can think about, what did I do? How did I do it? What was the impact? Think about collaboration, cross-functional elements, innovation, questioning the status quo, influencing without formal authority, leading projects, leading people, creative solutions to existing problems, what all the impact of this was. You could kind of think through all these different business school, MBA, leadership related type themes in articulating your bullets, rather than what we wouldn't want. And again, Alex, I don't get the sense you're going down this track anyway, but just as a friendly reminder to you and everyone else, rather than, kind of coming across as one-dimensional or overly technical in your resume. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. Last comment for you, Alex. Hopefully some of this download stuff is helpful. The goals that you've listed here, I know it's just 2 or 3 lines on a screen. It's still kind of early. You're evolving these. Short-term goal, transition into general management and strategy role in the satellite industry. I would reflect on that a little bit. It's ironic perhaps, because I often encourage and really hammer home the importance of goal specificity. I wonder if satellite industry, could that be overly niche? What satellite companies are really recruiting at these schools? There's like one person a year join, so I think you could wrestle with that. If we chat again, we could wrestle with it a little bit more, pros and cons, how to balance specificity, what might that look like? And then long term too, you mentioned it moving into investing in the longer term, 10 to 15 plus years. I'm not sure what type of investing you were suggesting there, but let's make sure it feels a little disjointed to me. I mean, the short-term goal feels related to what you do now, but the longer-term goal, investing, how does that connect? Is it investing in this industry? I think you just want to make sure, that who you are and what you've done to this point, plus the MBA, clearly equals, leads to, or enables your short-term goals. And then who you are and what you've done to this point, plus the MBA, plus the short-term goal, clearly equals, leads to, or enables the long-term goal. So I think we could talk through that a little bit more. But any last questions on that or reactions? I know I just threw a lot at you there, but hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. I don't think it's necessary to respond to the concerns or the comments. I think that they're all good comments and worth considering. I definitely appreciate you taking a look at my profile, and I hope it's useful to anyone else on the call. All
right, great. Well, thank you, Alex. We'll transition over to Krishna now, who gave us her introduction at the start of this call, and it's also should be up there on the screen as well. Krishna, do you have specific questions or specific topics that you'd like to address?
Yeah, I do actually. I guess my GMAT is the one that I've been most concerned about. I have a little bit of time before round one this year, and I'm just curious if, given especially how competitive people say it's going to be, if I should retake it.
Yeah, it's always a tough question, and you're at a 730, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it would like pain me, and I think almost be hard to say, whoa, you have a 730, you need to retake the GMAT. Like the 730, it sits on top of the average even for now there's going to be a but to this. There always is. It's not a definitive but the 730, obviously a fantastic GMAT score. And one I think you should be proud of. If you feel that you have more points up your sleeve, does more than a 730 help, especially at the super elites among these? It does. If we wanted to quantify that potentially a little bit, you'd maybe be boosting your chances at an interview by like at Harvard, Stanford. If you go from and I'm kind of basing this on some unofficial numbers that are published online. I could follow up with links if that's helpful, and a little bit of deducing and analysis that I've done within those as well. Like if somebody goes from a 730 to a 740 at Stanford, I think the numbers and is applying to Stanford, the numbers suggest perhaps a 2 to 3 percentage point increase in the chances of getting in, something to that effect. I mean, they feel like small numbers, but it's like it could also be like, might be a 2 percentage point increase on like an 8% chance of getting in. So that it's like a 25, or you're boosting your chances by 25%. So we could kind of muddy ourselves, kill ourselves with the numbers. I guess, do you feel like you have up your sleeve a higher score? You feel like, I got another 20 points in me?
Maybe my practice tests were definitely on the higher end of what this is showing. So I was a little bit bummed, but I know that I was basing that off of like what the internet and like GMAT Club says. So I wasn't really even sure if I was just maybe overthinking it. I guess also from like a statistics perspective, my GPA is fairly on average for the profiles for admitted students. And if I could erase my first year of college, I totally would off my transcript. But yeah, I thought maybe to make up for some of that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that if you didn't retake, as painful as retaking the GMAT is, do you think if you didn't retake it, you would regret not retaking it? That's another potential kind of logic to go through.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, yes. I guess that's a good way of looking at it. I think I would hate if my stats is what it came down to for a yes or no. But I know that it's never really just the numbers.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to mention too, is like GMAT, GPA, these are just one piece or two pieces of the application puzzle. Schools always say the magic word you'll hear at every information sessions, it's holistic. That's the buzzword you'll always hear. That's true. But numbers do matter as well. In this case, it's right on that. And I apologize, there is no like perfect answer to it. It's more a matter of thinking through these other elements. Would I regret not taking it? Do I feel like I have more points up my sleeve? Do I want to apply to all these schools in round one? Would I be able to retake and then be able to still get most or all of these in round one? If Harvard, is this like a definitive list of schools? It's definitely these 5. You're still
for round 1. It's definitive. Yeah, I might move Stanford to round 2. It's really just me shooting my shot at something I'm not sure if I know enough about at this point.
Got it. You don't know what about?
I don't think I know enough about the program at this point. I'm still like getting to talk to students and figuring out if I think it's the right fit for what I want to do.
Which program was that, though? I think I missed that part.
Sorry, Stanford.
Stanford, got it. Okay. And what I was going to say is that if 2 of your 5 schools in round 1 are Harvard, Stanford, again, these conversations always kind of work both ways. It's like, all right, I got more to do sooner, so I have less time to study for and retake the GMAT on one hand. But then you'd say, well, 2 of my 5 schools are Stanford, and yes, I'm kind of Harvard and Stanford, and yes, I'm kind of right there, right on top of their average GMAT, but my GPA is a little lower than their average. It's like you almost have to, and again, I'm happy to further this conversation. You just kind of have to wrestle with all these different factors. Would I regret it? Do I have time? What schools am I applying to? Do I feel like I have extra points up my sleeve? Objectively, if a 750, it gives you a better chance than a 730 if you're able to kind of drum that up. And I apologize, it's not a perfect answer, but it's a judgment call that takes those factors into consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Other thoughts or questions?
No, just curious to hear what you have to say. I think my main concern is that it seems like it's going to be a little bit more competitive than it is in normal years. And so just being able to stand out, or like if what your thoughts are on what this year is going to look like.
Yeah. And I, just on that point, we do hear that a lot and read that a lot. I don't know yet, personal perspective, I don't know yet if that's going to be true. I mean, MBA application volume historically is kind of counter-cyclical to the economy. No surprise, when the economy is strong, people don't feel like they want or need to apply to full-time MBA programs. If the economy weakens, well, people lose jobs, or they just think, okay, pursuing an MBA is my best option. I think we have to see, though, this is such an unprecedented situation, where now is COVID still going to be in play next fall when people who are applying now are going? Also on the international side, among international students, there's been a ton of change on the visa. Even in November, there could be more change. So I think a lot is up in the air. I wouldn't be surprised if application volume went down, to be honest. So I think it's just, we read all that. I've read those too. I would say do you follow your gut, go with your best, and we can't control what everyone else does. So I think you could just have confidence in putting forth your best application. Other things I observed here, and just to kind of give you, I guess, the download portion of it, feel free to interrupt with questions. I think, look, from a work experience standpoint, 2 years at a top 2 consulting firm, 1 year in private equity. These are top tier, classic kind of high level pre-MBA experiences. I think you could probably, you're at the PE firm now.
Yeah, so it'd be 2 years, so 4 years of work experience and matriculation.
Got it. Okay. But you're the first pre-MBA person.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the first hire that they've done below a VP.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. What I was going to say, sometimes at those firms, you could get a read on if they've had an existing pipeline, like where do those people go and get?
Yeah.
In this case, probably not so much.
There have been some. So on the deal side, I said more on like the consulting and operations side there. On the deal side, they've had a few folks go to some schools that are, I think, on my list here. So I've spoken to them at this point and gotten a pretty good read of what they did or what they thought helped.
Yep.
But it's pretty small, so there aren't that many people that do it.
Got it. Okay. Well, still, nevertheless, I think top tier consulting experience and then private equity experience is fantastic experience on its face. I would encourage you, again, and your recommenders, to make sure that stuff is unpacked. Don't leave it, even though whatever the firms that you list or the jobs that you list are going to be impressive in and of themselves. Let's think about, how do I unpack and deconstruct my experiences and then reconstruct and deliver them. Meaning what, all these things you've kind of listed here in just a summary fashion, how do I convey the real value of that? What I learned through doing it, the skills, the qualities that came across doing so, the impact that came across in doing things as well. So I think you've got top tier kind of work experience. By the way, that can factor a little bit too into do I want to retake the GMAT a little bit too? You're like, hey, I have really good work experience. My GPA is maybe a little bit below average for those top schools. My GMAT is on top of the average. Do I feel like I want or need to try to boost my score? If it's a small PE firm too, I think you alluded to this verbally as well as on the page. I imagine, I'll ask it as a question. Are you doing a lot more hands-on stuff in terms of the growth, interaction with leadership, it looks like?
Yeah.
Is that part of your job?
Yeah. So there's only 3 of us. So we all kind of tag team the conversations with the management on the company side. So I'd say I've been in meetings with their C-suite and work directly with them when the opportunity arises.
Okay, great. So I think small firms often have the opportunity for more hands-on, more leadership engagement, more direct impact, that sort of thing. I think you've got a nice complement here then between a bigger firm consulting, still top tier firm consulting, as well as then this really, really kind of like small, I've got my hands on the growth in meetings with C-suite. So really, again, unpacking all of that, sharing the impact, conveying the totality and all the different nodes of what you do. Will you be able to get a recommendation, like one from the consulting firm, one from your current employer?
I'm gonna do. No, my plan right now is both from the consulting firm. Just given, I just don't want to risk anything.
Okay,
Were it
no
not to work out.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. In many cases, you might have to explain why didn't I choose my current employer, but that's a very fair reason and a not uncommon reason. I can't, really small firm, I can't sacrifice my if this doesn't work out. So yeah, you might have to have 2 or 3 sentences of elaboration on that. And then when you think about the consulting firm, you can think about, well, all right, I'm picking 2 people from the same firm. I was there 2 years, but how can they complement one another?
Yeah.
And they speak to different things.
Yeah.
All right. Extracurriculars. It looked like you were really, really involved in many, many different things in undergrad, and then involved in some things post undergrad. Is that right?
Yeah. I think found it a little bit difficult in my first job with the work-life balance to do too much outside, but have had a chance in the last year or so since switching over to do more.
Okay, great. Yeah, look, again, not uncommon. Most people, but like, look, there's some people who have done nothing extracurricularly. There are some people who have like founded NGOs. Most of us are somewhere in between. And I think you've got really, really great involvement, extracurriculars in undergrad, and then maybe not as much, but perhaps understandably so, given what your jobs are, and it's ramped back up a little bit more recently. I think a challenge and something to think about with the experiences you had, particularly in undergrad, and I know, again, the way you've written it here is not the way you're going to put it in a resume or put anything else, but how do I channel that? How do I make it so that it's not like a laundry list of things? How do I figure out where the ones with more substance lie and how I can crystallize those? Or are there themes perhaps that belie these different, that kind of underscore all of these? What's the connective tissue between them? Why am I passionate about getting involved in them? What impact did I have in those as well? In some cases with essays, like I'm thinking of a Wharton #2 essay. They ask you to focus on a particular experience, what you learned from it, and how that influences how you're going to contribute. Kellogg #1 has for many years been like a leadership focused story. There are going to be cases here where you've got to pick a specific example, a specific anecdote to focus in on. And what you often end up doing is looking across. I'd encourage this, something I'd encourage for everyone to do. Reflect on your most prominent, meaningful and impactful and interesting professional experiences. Do the same for your personal or extracurricular experiences. You can kind of build lists of those or little kind of capsules of those. Those are good to have. It's a great exercise to go through. It's actually something where when time comes to interview later on, you'll want to have those capsules in your head. I always tell people, build a mental bench of examples because you're going to get asked behavioral questions in these interviews. Tell me about a time when. You want to have those little nuggets ready. But as it relates to essays, I would, sift through the essays and your apps more generally. You can sift through these and figure out, okay, which are the most preeminent, which are the most interesting, which could be of the caliber or of the substance to become an essay, like the main example engine in an essay, and then how even more mechanically, like on a resume or something, would I present these so that there is true substance and value to them and not just like a laundry listing or something. From a storytelling perspective, again, what's the passion, the purpose, the connective tissue behind them as well. But I think it's a strength for you. It's something that strength on its face, but again, something that you can like really unpack and channel even more so. I was a little unclear on the goals. You said pivot into corporate strategy and marketing role in industry.
Yeah, that's in pharma.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And ultimately work in emerging markets and commercialization launch of necessary therapies. Okay. Yeah, look, I think that being kind of going back to what I shared during the Alex portion of the dialogue, thinking through that whole narrative construct. What are my goals really, really specifically? And then what buckets of knowledge, skill, experience do I already have that are relevant to those? More importantly, what am I missing? Bucket A, bucket B, or E, F, G, H were the letters I used to describe those. So how does who you are and what you've done to this point, plus the MBA, equal lead to or enable those goals? Commercial product. Have you done it? Like, where does the pharma interest come from?
I was a little vague. I did mostly pharma consulting at my consulting firm. So I think just like all big pharma companies, that's where I did all of that work essentially. So wasn't life sciences. The fund I'm at now does healthcare, which is what I focus on. So ultimately kind of want to just go back to industry, do more of like an operational strategy role for different drugs or portfolios.
Okay. So it seems, I think very organic then seeming in terms of that narrative construct that I described.
Yeah, I was pre-med in college also. So so it's always been something I've been interested in. Didn't want to be a doctor. So this is what I'd rather do instead.
Yeah, and lots of dot connecting, like the dot connecting is even almost more like obvious again in your case, but yeah, definitely connect those dots. Make sure there's a clear though still why MBA. Like, why can't you just go do that now, right? Why do you need an MBA to make those next steps? You can draw in elements. It looks like some of these extracurriculars that you've been involved in were health related as well. So it all kind of accrues toward that passion and the ongoing evolution of that. I think you could think about, well, if I've advised these types of companies and then invested in them, well, why strategy? Why do I think that my greatest avenue to future impact is through corporate strategy or marketing? I think, by the way, you probably want to define like which of those is it marketing or corporate strategy? The former might just like gut reaction. The former seems to make more sense if you consulted, advised those.
Yeah, no, I think on the marketing side, this is why I need to define it. It's more like brand management or product launch management. And that's often like, depending on the company, just like split on like corporate functions. So I don't know what the holistic title will be called for what I want to do, but it sounds like corporate strategy is probably the most, I think, broad way of saying that or bucketing it.
Got it. Okay, great. Yeah. And, maybe perhaps last thing just to share with you too, we'll move on to Harrison is, just think about too, like what, and this is for everybody, like you want to be really specific about your goals. We want to make sure that the passion, purpose, motivations, origins of interest behind these are woven in as well. But then think too about like, what's the bigger picture problem I'm trying to solve with these goals? When I go into this industry, when I spend my life in it, short and medium and long term, what challenges are out there that in your case, having advised and invested in these types of similar companies over the past few years, that I've even perhaps observed through that, and it like kind of piqued your interest in going inside the strategy corridors of these firms because you believe there is a huge challenge and opportunity in what specifically, what about it, why pharma and not other elements of healthcare. So I think really digging into that and sharing the vision and connecting all those dots can make sense and benefit you, and looking, of course, at the resources in each of these schools that align with what you want to do and where you want to go next. All right. Any last thoughts or questions?
No. Thank you.
All right. My pleasure. So Harrison, we heard your introduction earlier. We have your profile up on the screen. What's top of mind for you? What can we address?
Yeah, so my main thing is I've worked mostly in pretty large companies, and I kind of want to transition into the startup space, specifically to have a closer hand in innovation and see it go a little bit faster. But when I think about how I frame that in an application of going into a startup, I think the default response in my mind is you don't really need an MBA to be in a, to join a startup. So the way I'm framing it, at least in my essays at this point, is there's kind of three things that I need from an MBA. One being, learn how to build, like operationalize a startup. Number two is just like learning really concrete leadership skills. And number three is building a strong healthcare network. I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that framing and if there's kind of other things that you think I should include.
Sure. Okay, great. So yeah, I think the first thing is, even before you go into those kind of why MBA, what you need, is to just, reflect deeply on the goals, play devil's advocate with yourself, with friends, if you know people at the programs, if you know people at, you have a friend of a friend of a friend, or even if you just reach out blindly, cold email to somebody in the Wharton Healthcare Club or who's in the HCM program. And that's true, by the way, for everybody, no matter your industry, no matter what you're interested in. School research and engagement, getting to know these programs, the ins, the outs, the in classroom, the out of classroom, the offerings, the culture, the community, getting to know them is super important. And I think they could be even more important in a situation like the one Harrison described, where he wants to get a better feel for like, okay, if I'm interested in healthcare, but I'm more interested in the startup side of it. Well, how do I put my finger on the pulse of the viability of that path coming out of an MBA? Do people come out of these programs and join healthcare-oriented startups? If so, which ones, and what's the recruiting process like? And sometimes you even get a little intel on like what admissions might think of that. I think that it is certainly nichier, Harrison, to say I want to go the startup route. There is perhaps a potential retort that you could receive, as you mentioned, which is great to be thinking of like potential objections. Why do I need an MBA for that? So I need to build that up. So I think doing that research and thinking about, okay, what does this look like? What does it feel like? Where would it actually lead? Like what type of healthcare startups, and do people go there? And what level or series are they in funding? Like those are things I think to unpack a little bit more. What you wouldn't want in your applications from a goals perspective is just to say, I want to join a healthcare startup and then stop there. You want to have layers of specificity. I think the onus for specificity is probably even a little higher for you because it's not as intuitive as joining like a healthcare leadership, a 3-year leadership program at some big healthcare firm. You're going to have to proactively share that definition. The amount by which you need to share it is going to vary school to school. Harvard, there's a 300 characters goals question in the application. Wharton's got a traditional goals essay. Kellogg's got a goals short answer. Fuqua's got a goals short answer. Booth's got short answers and an essay. Columbia got 500 words just about goals. So there's going to be no hiding for you in terms of what the real details of these goals are. So I think really reflect on that. If it truly, genuinely, authentically in your heart is healthcare startups, then I think own that. Just make sure that the specificity is there and the rationale is there. And even within healthcare startups, as we were sharing with Krishna a moment ago, like what within healthcare, what even in the startup space, what type of healthcare and why that? And what are the challenges within it? Why are you attracted to that? Why do you think startups are the best avenue to disrupt that? So I think, really kind of going through that, if that is genuinely where you land, you want to kind of add the specificity, add the layers to it. And I think that would help you. You mentioned a why MBA. You're starting to sketch out that those kind of buckets of needs. Just remind me and the listeners, just again, how you kind of labeled those or how you were thinking about them.
Yeah, so the three kind of buckets in my mind, and I think it's on the screen here, is just gaining kind of that understanding of how to start and grow the company. So kind of, from idea into execution, just getting a kind of a concrete foundational understanding of kind of the steps involved. So that's probably the biggest thing. The second is just getting a little more concrete on, specifically what's my leadership style and how can I improve that? How do people perceive me? as the second thing. And the third is, go somewhere with a relatively strong healthcare network, or just a kind of a, broader network of leaders in general, and build that up.
Great. Okay, super. And I do see that now on the screen as well. So look, I think what you're doing here is already a good bit down the road of some of what I was talking about over the course of this entire conversation. Given what my goals are, what knowledge, skills, and experience do I already have that are relevant? I often call them ABC or ABCD. And then what am I missing? What are my needs? That's my why MBA. And then if you look a little ahead of that, how does each of these programs uniquely fill those buckets? You'll want to make that case in a Wharton number 1, in a Booth number 1, in a Columbia number 2, where they ask about why is Columbia perfect for you. So I think you've started to define those buckets. If A, B, C, D is what you already have, if this is E, F, G, H, could be 3 buckets, could be 4. And as we're about to uncover here, they're somewhat fungible. They're not going to be the same exact buckets for everybody. Even for you or any one individual, the way that you organize, cluster, and then articulate the specificity of them in an essay or in an interview can kind of vary a little bit too. I think you're kind of on the right track here conceptually. Different ways to kind of enhance or further develop these. You said start and grow a company. Okay, so that's kind of entrepreneurship related and startup related. A couple of thoughts there to add on to it, or just to kind of play with it a little bit. Are there other kind of hard skills or toolkits or knowledge that you need beyond just the entrepreneurial? Or perhaps in delivering that, make sure it doesn't sound just entrepreneur, like, oh yeah, I need entrepreneurial skills because I want to go to a startup. Well, what actually within that, unpack that. If you had what role at one of these healthcare startup companies, you might be a jack of all trades, but like, what do you need? Is it strategy stuff? Is it the operation stuff? Is it team building stuff? I think you can unpack that further from a delivery standpoint in an essay. You could also play around with, do I want to kind of bucket the hard skills and the knowledge and stuff that's maybe a little more in classroom, professorial in nature, speaker series, like the information and the information and the toolkit stuff, the knowledge and the toolkit stuff. And then I could bucket hands-on experience separately. So I need to learn about it, but then in a separate bucket or a separate breath or separate references, I need to do it. I need to get my hands dirty doing it. Every one of these programs is going to have experiential learning offerings. The more traditional of those, you might advise a company, a big company sometimes. You and a team of classmates will advise that company, but those things exist for startups as well. You just kind of have to unpack the offerings for the different programs. So you'll be able to get not only the relevant in-classroom from professors, hard skills, toolkit, knowledge, you'll also be able to get the hands-on experience doing it. Some of the fungibility here, right? Those could be addressed in like the same paragraph. They could be snapped into separate paragraphs. The hands-on experience stuff, it could come in the same breath as gaining concrete leadership skills. Although you could, all at the same time, you could address leadership as a separate category unto itself. But that's some of kind of, I guess, the breaking apart and crystallization. To continue on that vein, when you mention things like gaining concrete leadership skills, and with any of this stuff, make sure, as for everybody, make sure you're tying what you need back to your goals, and of course tying it to the school as well. So like, what kind of leadership skills in particular, and why do you need those? Maybe you've led blank to this point, but you haven't really led blank or blank or blank. Wharton gives you the opportunity to lead those or develop as a leader. Well, how? With leadership skills too, we can again think about like the range of offerings at different schools. There are going to be more classroom-oriented leadership workshops. There are going to be things that are out of the classroom. Wharton has leadership expeditions. There's going to be, and every school has, myriad of these. And there are going to be hands-on leadership things that you could do, leading clubs, leading conferences. Well, in an essay for one of these schools, which club, which conference, which whatever, And not just that, go much, much further. It's not just I want to join or participate in. And it's not even just what role do you want to have. It's in that role, what do I hope to do? What do I envision doing? What opportunities do I see to kind of simultaneously add value to the school and gain these leadership skills at the same time? And again, you could kind of, once you bucket these out, you can move the chess pieces and the references around a little bit. But with these, again, I think the overarching point, you're on the right track. How do I crystallize these and develop the specificity of them? How does network play in? How does the community play in? A lot of times the communities at these schools are the like engine through which you develop these leadership skills. It's student driven. You are leading peers and peers are leading you. And that's how you're all kind of becoming leaders. In what way does the network help you? Could you bucket community and network together in a delivery? What's the greater substance? How does the network actually, I think you'd want to make sure that becomes more tangible. But that's I guess a quick and dirty or not so quick and dirty on how to think about some of those buckets.
Awesome. Thank you. My only other thing is when it comes to my GPA, it's not like the highest. Is that level like the level at which I should be writing in that like additional essay section, like, hey, this is the reason why it's not a 3.9?
I don't think so. Unless you looked at your transcript and like there were like a couple of standout things to the downside, like I really underperformed during a certain semester or a certain year, or I like flunked 2 classes that they're going to be like worried that you flunked or got a D or a C or something in. Mm-hmm. I think if it's a 3.46 and the performance is pretty consistent and there are no glaring holes, I don't think you would need to. Krishna, by the way, you mentioned that your first year was like a little bit of more underperformance. I think you could kind of, you maybe could, if it really was an outlier in terms of performance, you maybe could comment on it. But we could take that if we do a little more Q&A, or again, if any of us chat offline. But I don't think, Harrison, that you would need to no, not in this case. Look, Columbia's average GPA usually is some of like Harvard, it's usually more up near 3.7, Wharton 3.6, Kellogg 3.6, Columbia 3.6, 3.5 in prior years. You're like, a tenth of a point behind. I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, and I'll just share a few more thoughts. Then I guess we'll turn it over to. I believe it goes to the broader audience for questions that GMAT Club will share across the bottom of the page. But Harrison, other things I observed. You just mentioned optional essay. You had 3 jobs in 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's probably right on the cusp of like, is that a lot of movement? 10 years ago, it would have been a little less so now. People move more. If you wanted to, or felt that it would be additive to take an opportunity in an optional essay or an additional information section, just to like, if somebody looked at your resume and was like, man, why did he move? Like, you kind of have to, and I'm happy to opine further on that, but that could be something potentially to comment on. Just because it's an optional essay, by the way, doesn't mean you write 500 words about this one thing. It would be like 3 sentences or 4 sentences or something, almost like a glorified bullet that would comment on that and just elucidate for the reader. Again, this overarching point of like, what would, if I didn't know you and looked at your application, what questions do we think I'd have? And how do I preempt some of those questions? That could be something that goes in there for you. I think you've got extremely relevant, like Krishna and Alex as well, extremely relevant undergrad experience here. So unpacking all of that and kind of constructing the relevance. How does A, B, C, D that I already have, plus the E, F, G, H that I'm missing, equal, lead to, or enable these goals? long-term entrepreneurial goals, right? To start your own company.
Right.
Those can be a little bit tricky. I think with that too, they're probably, just as with your startup goals in the short term, everyone needs to be specific. There's probably even more of an onus of specificity on you when you have startup goals and entrepreneurial goals. I think you would be doing yourself a disservice if you just kind of waved a very superficial wand in your essays and said, long-term, I hope to start my own healthcare company. I'm not suggesting you would do that either. I know what you've shared here is just indicative, and it's for purposes of this kind of dialogue. But develop the specificity of that as well. Like, it's hard to look into the future and know exactly what you want to build. But, going back to that question of like, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve here? The bigger picture problem. It could be business related. It could be quasi-business and social. Is there a challenge? Is there an opportunity that I see? Well, what's my vision? And really forcing yourself to share specificity of that vision. Columbia, again, you're going to have 500 words just about your goals. So the why Columbia comes in the next essay, 250 words. So that's an opportunity and really a requirement to make sure that you share specificity of vision. Possibly even sharing a fuller trajectory than just short and long. A lot of times, the way these questions are asked, we all think about goals as a barbell. I'm going to do this in the really short term. I'm going to do this in the really long term. Well, what's the actual trajectory? Is there a middle piece? Is there a stepping stone? You could deliver most of your specificity or attention around the short and long, but maybe what kind of gets you from that first startup job to like launching your own company. We talked about building your network as part of your why MBA. Well, for people who are launching their own company, partners, funding, things like that often come by way of network at schools. And you could kind of talk to, some alum of one of these schools who started their own company and pick their brain about in what ways did the network of the school, did the community, did your peers help you achieve this vision of starting your own company? Maybe a lot of times co-founders are people you met in school, or seed funders are people you met in school, and that sort of thing. So that would be a way to kind of build out that specificity. But I think that covers some of the observations I had, and hopefully is helpful. I know it's like drinking from a fire hose on these things, but hope it helps, and we can turn it over to questions. I believe the questions come from the crowd, but if they don't mute you guys and any of you have burning follow-up questions, we could take those as well. Any questions from the audience? I believe we've done in the past. We'll look across the bottom of the screen. All right, industry shift. We have Sumit asking, industry shift through MBA as future goals. Is that a big no-no for MBA applications? So is it okay to shift industries or change industries by way of an MBA? I would say, Sumit, definitely not. That meaning it is okay. It is okay. Plenty of people, tons of people shift industries by way of the MBA. I think that the more important thing within that is to think about, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the construct and coherence and what leads you. Why are these new goals or new industries? Why are these your goals? What knowledge, skills, and experience do you already have that are relevant? What knowledge, skills, and experience are you missing and therefore need to acquire through the MBA? So an industry shift is totally fine, very common. A big reason why a lot of people go into particularly full-time MBA programs. But Sumit, the challenge then becomes, how do I tell that story? How do I connect those dots? Why do I want to shift into that? And how does who I am and what I've done in the past, plus the MBA, equal lead to or enable these goals? If somebody just articulated, I want to go into some completely new industry and did not provide a thoughtful, cogent argument about how all these dots connected, then it does become kind of a knock on you or a detriment to your application. But not shifting industry is totally fine. You just want to make sure you tell the story behind that and connect the dots. We have a suggestion here from Tejo for Harrison. Neo effect is the kind of start. You guys can see it on the screen. I don't need to repeat it. So appreciate that. And Harrison, that speaks to, by the way, those are the little pieces of intelligence. I was talking about school research and engagement and talking to people in the healthcare club. There are going to be some people who want to go into pharma or life sciences or leadership programs. There are going to be other people within those who want to go into healthcare startups. So having those dialogues, making that outreach, true for everybody. Talk to people who are charting a similar course as you wish to chart, and you're going to pick up those great nuggets of information like Tejo just shared as well. Akshay, is it not acceptable to mention that after MBA, I would like to join my current company back in a leadership role to grow its market beyond the US? Interesting. I would say that is acceptable. I have actually seen it. I think you want to kind of wrestle and always play devil's advocate with yourself, and even again, dialogue with people perhaps who, I don't know what industry Akshay is in, but it's on the table. It's I wouldn't say that it's not acceptable. Kind of similar to what I was just saying before regarding the question about career change. This is maybe almost like a little bit on the other end of the spectrum. It's the opposite of a complete industry transition. You're actually going back to the same company. Well, it is okay so long as you really work through in your head, is that definitely what you want to do? Is that the truth and genuineness and authenticity of what's going to happen next? And then even more importantly, why do you need an MBA to do that? There would be a huge onus on you, an okay onus, but a big onus on you, Akshay, to just make sure you're really articulating, well, what's the difference between what I'd be doing post-MBA and pre-MBA? Why do I need an MBA to get there? What greater impact could I have? It also depends a little bit on what the company is. Like if you're at like a really small startup-y kind of company now, probably less compelling than if you're at like a multinational or a company to which the admissions committee would be excited to say, well, we're sending an alum back to, like you're at this great company, multinational, Fortune 5, whatever it is. You have been there, you've succeeded there, but at kind of a pre-MBA or lower level, for lack of a better term, and you could go back there and join a leadership program, become a leader, some more senior thing. If it's a smaller firm, I think that would be maybe more to your detriment, but you'd have to kind of unpack it. So conceptually, it's not acceptable in and of itself, but you really got to tease it out. And again, tell the story within it. Brand or core, any tips on how to approach applications when coming from engineering at a startup? I've heard making the startup seem as legit as possible is important. I think if I could rephrase the engineering part of that is going to be similar to the dialogue we had with Alex in the beginning. How do you make sure in articulating your experience and crafting your resume? Same thing for recommenders, your recommenders too, encourage them. We don't want to be overwhelmed as the reader of your application. We don't want to be overwhelmed with the technical. We don't want to hear all engineering jargon. It's great to see that you have and are capable and perhaps even expert in the engineering field you're in, but unpack your experiences. Where is their leadership? Where is their influence? Where is their team building? Where is their consensus driving? Where is their perhaps client-facing activities? Where have you persuaded or questioned things or reinvented processes? Think of all these interesting lenses. By the way, this litany of lenses is true for everybody, but I think engineers sometimes, because it can come across as more narrowly technical, takes an extra reminder. And then to the question on the screen, to the rest of the question on the screen, or the second part of it, I've heard making the startup seem as legit as possible is important. I think another way to think about that is startups and lesser known companies are not going to explain themselves as much as like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Goldman Sachs, whatever. The big name companies, it's going to be kind of like obvious. Admissions committees know if you have like a certain title, you're an analyst at JP Morgan, you're an associate at JP Morgan, like they know where you fit in for the most part. I still say everyone, make sure it's clear. If it's not clear, if somebody who doesn't know you couldn't decipher these things by looking at your resume, it's probably not clear enough. in this case, to the question on the screen, making the startup seem as legit as possible. Again, I would make sure it seems as clear as possible. You should not be fudging any information by any means. That's a big no-no, and that's a disqualifying no-no, and you're going to be signing off in applications that you're not doing that. But just it's not so much about making it seem as legit as possible. It's making it seem as clear as possible. What does the startup do? How much revenue? How much funding? How many people? And then what do you do with it? And what is the purview of your responsibilities and this kind of scope of things that you've done and had an impact on? So I think that's a couple of ways to think about that. Maybe we'll take a couple more, two more here or something. Arturo, any advice for someone who's interested in pursuing an MBA and then become a physician with the hopes of becoming a chief medical doctor or hospital administrator? Very interesting question, and ambitious and really awesome, I think, angle here. Many MBA programs do have MDs. It's usually not a ton of them, but in a given class at any of the programs we've talked about today, there often are a couple of people who are doctors looking to somehow combine their medical degree and experience with business experience in order to pursue roles like the one you've listed there, Arturo. I'd have to really think if I've encountered anyone who did the MBA first and then became a doctor later, probably because in many countries or academic settings, the sequence is more that you kind of declare your pre-med and pursue the medical coursework earlier, and it takes longer to do that. And then people kind of cap it off with an MBA. You have to look program to program to see if any MD MBA joint programs exist. I think they'd be fewer and further between. But it's definitely on the table. I don't know it definitely exists in the sense that there are people who have MDs, pursue MBAs, combine these things in a manner that you've described. I'm thinking maybe even the founder of One Medical, if anyone's heard of One Medical, went kind of down this route. I know in my own Berkeley Haas class several years ago, we had a couple of folks who fit into this category. That's something, again, Arturo, you could probably reach out to members of a club, reach out to student region reps, try to connect with these couple of people at school to pick at that a little bit. As far as MBA and then MD, that feels a little bit more of a challenging narrative to me. If you're somebody who's a few years out of undergrad, you've got a few years of work experience. Now you're going to tell the admissions committee, I want an MBA, and then I'm going to go get a medical degree. That feels tougher. I think you'd want to really think about that or reconsider that. Not for if that's what you want to do in your heart, go for it. But as far as an application narrative feels tougher, for the most part, when you see MD, MBA hybrid, usually the student has the MD already is a doctor and is now getting their MBA to kind of build more towards something like you described here. We'll take one more question from Osama. Does it help you or does it go against you if you already have a CFA and your post-MBA goal is still finance? Oh, I think it helps. A CFA is additive. It is a proof point, and even whether it's level 1, level 2, level 3. Obviously, if you have the full-on CFA and you've passed all the levels, that's incrementally more impressive than just having done. But even level 1, these are things that add to the narrative and provide further evidence of existing skills and interest in the space that you're claiming your goals lie. So I think black and white answer there. It helps you if you already have a CFA. Just figure out again, well, how does this fit in? What are my goals? You said your goals in finance. Well, in what element of finance and how does everything fit together? I think we can leave it there today. Hopefully this was all helpful. Again, a lot of information for everyone to digest. So I appreciate everyone kind of going through the fire hose exercise with us. We appreciate Alex, Krishna, and Harrison for sharing their stories online here for everyone's own benefit. I'd like to offer to them, of course, and to everyone else out there. If you would like to continue this conversation. If something triggered a thought today, if you'd like to go through this exercise even more personalized for you, feel free to visit avantiprep.com, avantiprep.com, and you can sign up for a free consultation there. Happy to chat, and wish everyone the best of luck in their next few weeks and months, whether you're applying round 1 or round 2. Round 1 kind of coming up, round 2 on the horizon shortly after that. So great speaking with Alex, Krishna, and Harrison today. Best of luck to you and everyone else out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.